All right, today on The Explainer, we're jumping into a story that's just incredible. It's about a financial deal that everyone thought was completely impossible, a deal that ended up changing Chinese banking forever.
Okay, so our story kicks off back in 2002, and it all starts with a pitch. A pitch so audacious, so out there, it seemed completely doomed from the get-go.
I mean, think about it. An American firm trying to take control of a Chinese national bank? It had never, ever been done. So you can see why Weijian Shan, when he first heard this idea, his mind was just filled with ifs.
So, to really get why this was such a long shot, you've got to understand what the Chinese banking world was like in the early 2000s. I mean, on the surface, everything looked great, totally booming. But if you scratched beneath that surface, well, some analysts were warning it looked a lot like a giant Ponzi scheme.
And get a load of this number. Back in 2001, the price tag to fix China's bad loan problem was estimated at a staggering $518 billion. Now, to put that into perspective for you, that was almost half of the country's entire GDP. Just wow.
The whole system was just drowning in what are called non-performing loans, or NPLs. Basically, money the banks loaned out that they were never getting back. And on paper, most of these banks were technically broke, insolvent. The only things keeping them afloat were, one, a constant flood of new cash from a population that saved a ton of money, and two, this kind of unspoken promise from the government that it would never, ever let them fail.
But here's the crazy part. Buried in all that risk was this massive, massive opportunity. You see, the government controlled the interest rates. They set how much banks could charge for loans and how little they could pay for deposits. So the profit margin? It was pretty much guaranteed by the state. If you could just figure out how to avoid making bad loans, banking in China was literally like having a license to print money.
Okay, so grabbing this opportunity, that was going to take a negotiation of truly epic proportions.
See, here's the thing you have to understand. In China, control of a bank wasn't on the stock market like it is in the West. Those public shares, that was just a small piece of the pie. The real power, the controlling majority, was held in these things called legal person shares. And guess who owned them? The state. So to get control, Newbridge had to do the impossible, convince the government to sell them these shares. And you guessed it, a foreign firm had never, ever done that before.
And this was not a quick handshake deal, let me tell you. It was a brutal 30-month marathon. I mean, the deal almost collapsed multiple times. A rival bidder popped up out of nowhere, which led to a lawsuit. There were just countless moments where it looked like the whole thing was going to go up in smoke. It really was a battle of just pure, stubborn persistence.
And this little rhyme from a Shenzhen official, it just perfectly sums up the whole high-risk, high-reward vibe they were dealing with. The government was basically saying, hey, the door is open for investment, but make no mistake about it, you are completely on your own.
So, you'd think getting the deal done was the hard part, right? No, getting the keys to the bank was just the beginning. Now came the really hard part, fixing a bank that was, well, fundamentally broken from the inside out.
And the problems they found were just staggering. Right after they signed the deal, the new team uncovered a single, recent, bad loan for 1.5 billion yuan. Just one loan. And that loan alone was big enough to wipe out over a third of the bank's entire capital. It could have sunk the whole ship right then and there.
So what did they do? Their solution was actually a classic turnaround strategy. They basically split the bank in two. They created a bad bank on the inside, a special department where they dumped all the toxic, bad loans. This kind of isolated the poison, you know? It let the good part of the bank get back to business and focus on making healthy new loans.
But fixing the numbers on a spreadsheet, that was one thing. Shan knew that was just treating the symptoms. The real disease, the root cause, was the bank's culture, the very thing that created all those bad loans. And that had to change big time.
Shan basically told the employees, look, from now on, this bank is going to operate like a real market economy. It needed a system with actual consequences. You do a good job, you get rewarded. You do a bad job, you get punished. And crucially, there had to be a way to get rid of the rotten apples. And to lead this huge cultural change, they didn't mess around. They brought in an absolute heavyweight, Frank Newman, a former deputy secretary of the U.S. Treasury. He took over as chairman and CEO. And this wasn't just about hiring a new boss. This was a massive signal. It needed approval from the very top of the Chinese government. And it basically announced that a whole new era of international standards was here.
All right, so after all that,
Years of fighting, rebuilding, and totally transforming a national bank from the inside out, you gotta be wondering, did this huge gamble actually pay off?
Oh, did it pay off? You bet it did. Big time. Newbridge Capital walked away with a 14-fold return on their initial investment. 14 times their money.
The whole adventure finally wrapped up about a decade after it started. Through a merger with Ping An Bank, they cashed out, successfully exiting their investment. And in the process, they had taken one of China's absolute worst-performing banks and turned it into one of its most respected. What a turnaround.
So, no doubt about it, this deal was a landmark achievement. But that was 20 years ago. So the big question is, what does this story tell us about investing in China today?
Well, according to Weijian Shan, it comes down to this: the core social contract in China. The government's legitimacy, he says, comes from one thing: economic performance. Their main job is to deliver growth and make people's lives better. And he argues that really, the only way that's ever been proven to work is through a market economy.
And this is really interesting. You hear all the tense political talk between the US and China, right? But Shan points out that the economic reality on the ground tells a different story. The two countries are still incredibly dependent on each other economically. The actual trade between them isn't just strong, it actually hit an all-time high recently.
And all of this brings us to the final, really critical question. What Newbridge pulled off was absolutely trailblazing. It kicked open doors that were sealed shut. But when you look at the geopolitical climate today, you just have to wonder, could a deal like that, a foreign firm taking control of a national Chinese bank, ever happen again?